All right, we are live from the actually we're on the third floor here at the Oklahoma State Capitol. The action's down on the second floor of the Oklahoma State Capitol, a rally by the Oklahoma Educators Association. Dave Morris from the Oklahoman, alongside this gentleman right here, Mr. Ben Felder. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good morning, Dave.
Yesterday, thousands of teachers and other people, state employees included, rallied outside. Today, the goal was to pack the inside of the Capitol. We heard earlier this morning that they wanted to talk with the House when they came into session at 9:30 this morning to chat with them. You were outside earlier. What's the crowd like out there today?
It's not quite as big as it was yesterday, and I think we kind of expected that, but I would say it's bigger than I thought. They announced, OEA announced that today they were going to hold their rally inside, and we've obviously can see that the Capitol is pretty packed already. But outside, it's kind of similar to the environment that it was yesterday. There are tents set up, there's music playing. There are a lot of educators out there. I always kind of struggle with crowd guesses and try not to wade in those waters too much. I think at this point, it may be a little smaller than it was yesterday, excuse me, but not by much. This is a big crowd and maybe even bigger than I even thought we would see on Tuesday.
When you walk up on the south side of the Oklahoma Capitol, you see the stage, you see the speakers. It's still set up, ready to go for rallying throughout today. Again, the action this morning, though, is on the inside of the Capitol, the second floor. Teachers are rallying. OEA has them rallying. I mentioned as we started our live coverage that the AFT had a press conference this morning. You were over there. What did you hear? Yeah,
well, actually, it was kind of a meetup of their members, the AFT union, and they were handing out lists of lawmaker offices. Right now, the name of the game for them is they are pushing for a couple of bills, including repeal the capital gains tax or deduction. So they want to get rid of that deduction as a way to fund public education. Like I said, they were passing out lists of lawmaker offices to their members, and that was their plan of attack. In fact, I talked to Mary Best, who's the statewide president of the AFT, that said the focus right now, the focus today is on lawmakers. It's great to rally and it's great to let our voices be heard, and that's important. But we also need to move the needle when it comes to the legislature, and that was the focus for them today, and I expect we're going to see a lot of that from teachers today. We saw it yesterday. We saw a lot of educators that were meeting with lawmakers. Some lawmakers were, welcoming into their office. Others, were nowhere to be found. It's kind of how it goes. But day two looks like in a lot of ways, a repeat of day one.
As you mentioned, they were encouraging lawmakers to vote for House Bill 1086, which would reinstate that capital gains tax to offset some of the money they said was lost with the hotel tax was removed. What are some of the other things we're looking for today?
Well, we're kind of looking to see the resolve of teachers and the spirit, which right now seems
pretty loud.
That was the big question for today. We knew that yesterday was coming for a while. There were some questions after last week's passage of the tax increase in the legislature. Were teachers still going to come out? They said they were, and so we thought, okay, there's going to be a big rally on Monday. But how long is this going to last? A lot of teachers I talked to yesterday said they're here for the long haul. They're going to keep coming back until they see action. And so far, they're staying true to that word here on day two.
Of the schools that are out today, the large ones, Oklahoma City, Edmond, Norman, they're all out. Could it possibly be they're going to be waiting till later in the day to make that decision of, hey, we're not going to have school tomorrow?
Yeah, you hear from a lot of district leaders that they're not going to make those decisions quickly. Some schools have already said that they're going to be out for the rest of the week, or they're prepared to be. But I think what's really interesting about this movement is it really is educator-driven. And I think you can see that in the sense that the Oklahoma Education Association has been really kind of, and I don't mean this as a criticism necessarily, but it's really kind of been slow to respond to events in the legislature because they've really been kind of following the direction of teachers. And I think for a lot of school districts, it's the same thing. Oklahoma City school leaders have said, we kind of need to wait and see where this day goes. We need to talk to our teachers. A lot of districts are doing daily surveys and polls to try to get a sense of whether or not their teachers are going to show. It's one thing for the district to say we're going to be open. It's another thing for those teachers to actually show up. And oftentimes, if more than 20% of your staff is gone, you really just don't have enough staff to conduct a day of school. And so I think for the OEA, for the AFT, for a lot of district leaders, they're really kind of following teachers on this right now, and those teachers are leading them back to the Capitol.
You bring up a good point. That's something we have talked about over the past couple of weeks, is that the teachers, this grassroots movement via social media, then OEA says, all right, we're going to support this and get behind it and sort of organize the lead here. But it really has kind of come from an organic beginning with the teachers.
Yeah, and we talk about social media a lot because it's a big deal. And you know, when you think about the teacher walkout of 1990, I mean, Facebook and Twitter didn't exist. I mean, you really saw a lot of that. And once again, it sounds like I'm being critical. I'm not trying to be, but you saw that leadership coming from OEA because you needed kind of a central organization to kind of put this on and plan. And OEA is definitely involved. I mean, they're the lead organization. They're the ones that are coordinating the rally and transportation and stuff like that. But really, I mean, I think it's safe to say that this walkout was born on Facebook. And especially when teachers, you know, teachers have been talking about their frustration for a while now. But when you saw a few weeks ago about what happened in West Virginia, a lot of teachers took to Facebook and said, hey, we need to do that here. We saw what happened out there. We can do the same thing here. And so that's why a movement like this is kind of hard to organize and hard to keep track of because it's very fluid and it's taking place kind of in the digital space and not necessarily on a daily press release.
Don't you find that kind of interesting? Perhaps the teachers have learned from the students of how to use social media. For example, a couple weeks ago, that March for Our Lives rally was a social media organized by the students. Perhaps the teachers are seeing the power of that and following suit.
Yeah, maybe years of taking away their phones, they were actually learning how to use the technology. No, but teachers know that. I mean, they've embraced social media even beyond this. I mean, we've seen. I mean, there are some massive Facebook pages out there centered around the idea of education advocacy in Oklahoma. I think you saw a couple years ago with the dozens of teachers that ran for state office that was kind of born a lot out of one-on-one conversation, but also teachers being inspired by posts they were seeing online. It's a great tool for educators to share their experience. We've seen a lot of viral posts of teachers sharing not just photos of their classrooms, but also just sharing stories of how funding cuts are impacting their students and their profession. And so it's been a really effective way. And once again, it's a way for them to really connect with the public on this. I mean, a lot of these teachers, they're Facebook friends, their parents and families and members of the community. And once again, I mean, this is a movement that's being directed in a way by social media and not so much by a daily press release with a schedule like you may have seen in work stoppage and work action of the past.
I'm Dave Morris alongside the Oklahoman's Ben Felder. We're at the Oklahoma State Capitol. We're up on the third floor, surrounded by teachers and supporters of this Oklahoma teacher walkout. Down on the second floor rotunda, it is packed with people with signs and chants as this rally kind of gains some steam here today. Two things I want to dive into. One, you mentioned the various stories hearing from teachers. A lot of media coverage of this event, both local media coverage and national media coverage. But there's stories everywhere because teachers, just as a role, as a profession, affect so many people in so many different areas of our lives. These teachers have a lot of stories.
No, you're exactly right. And it's kind of what makes, I mean, if I can say this as a reporter, it makes this kind of a thrilling time to do the job because we have a sea of teachers and every one of them has a story. I mean, sometimes you go to events or you're doing a story and it's tough to get people to talk to you. That's not one of those events. I mean, just go into the crowd and you pull a teacher aside and they share their story and they share a personal story. And so you're right. I mean, a lot of these teachers have seen the impact in their classroom for years. They can tell you how it's impacted their students, how it's impacted their own family. And I was talking to State Superintendent Joy Hoffmeister yesterday, and I said, hey, what does your day look like during a walkout like this? She said, well, I'm talking to lawmakers, obviously, but I'm also continuing to encourage teachers and encouraging them to keep telling your stories. Because she said that's the best way to enact change is to continue to tell your stories. And there are thousands of teachers here. There are thousands of stories here.
It's been interesting watching the media types, both the local and the national, their coverage of this story. Bill Weir from CNN, I believe he's from Oklahoma, but he had a great story talking with various teachers and the impact of business. CNN and NPR both spoke with you. What are some of the questions from the national media to you, and how are they perceiving this situation?
Well, a lot of the national media is looking at it through the national context of other demonstrations that are happening across the country. In Kentucky, we saw what happened in West Virginia a few weeks ago. Arizona and some other states are talking about having their own work stoppages. I mean, in a lot of ways right now, the public school is the epicenter for demonstration and for protest. And it has been for a while. That's not new, but we are seeing kind of a new moment of time of that. I mean, we saw demonstrations coming out of schools when it comes to DACA and immigration. We've seen protests come from schools when it comes to school shootings and violence, especially following Parkland. And now, when we're talking about basic funding of core services like education, we're seeing that movement come from schools. So a lot of the national outlets are kind of looking at this in the national context because there is kind of a national moment right now. Now some are looking at it kind of through partisan storylines. I mean, West Virginia, Kentucky, Arizona, Oklahoma, these are very red states, Republican states. So there is a focus on that a little bit. I was talking with a radio station this morning, and they were kind of asking me about those kind of partisan lines, and I said, I think a lot of people look at, a union-led movement, and they kind of think of it as more of a progressive or a liberal, and there's definitely probably a lot of Democrats here, but I don't know that that's a fair, an accurate description of what we're seeing. A couple of years ago, with the help of a local pollster, we took the list of licensed teachers in Oklahoma, ran it against the voter registration list, and we found that teachers, it should be not a surprise, but mirror the state as a whole. They lean Republican in Oklahoma, and so this is not a bunch of Democrats up here trying to get Republican lawmakers to do things. I mean, they're focusing on Democratic lawmakers as well. This isn't necessarily a red and blue thing, but this is a bipartisan group of teachers, I guess is the point I'm trying to make, and we've seen that in the past. And so, yeah, you're right, the national media is kind of looking at what does this mean in the context of the political storylines across the country. But here in Oklahoma, I mean, you don't see a lot of, I've seen a couple candidates for office, kind of using this opportunity. I saw a couple candidates for governor, a Democratic candidate, but really this doesn't feel like a partisan event, at least not from what I've seen. And there's plenty of signs that have targeted lawmakers. I've seen Governor Fallon's face more than a few times on some of these posters, but I haven't really seen any mention of Republican versus Democrats. Right now, this is really about funding public education.
All right, Dave Morris alongside Ben Felder from the Oklahoman. We'll wrap it up with this. We had a lot of coverage yesterday of various angles of this story: the business impact, the schools, how students are being fed, various activities for the students while schools are out. Be sure to look for that coverage on our website at newsok.com. We had a ton of video yesterday and lots of stories and articles from our colleagues as well. Ben, last question for you. What are some of the storylines you're following today?
Well, the big story, like it was yesterday, is what does this look like tomorrow? I mean, is this going to continue into Wednesday? As of right now, I imagine if I asked all these people, they'd say they'll be back here on Wednesday. So that's a big storyline. Second thing is, what kind of response are we going to see from lawmakers? I mean, we didn't really see any action at all from lawmakers yesterday. Some of them were talking with teachers. The governor put out a statement, but for the most part, there was no indication that they were ready to move on any kind of specific bill. Well, a lot of teachers, like I mentioned earlier, are focusing on trying to lobby lawmakers around certain bills. So that'll be a big question: is the legislature showing any willingness to budge on any of these issues?
Once again, he's Ben Felder with the Oklahoman. Be sure to sign up for his email newsletter. It's called The Morning Bell. You can find it on newsok.com. It comes out every morning, whether there's a rally or not, with all sorts of education-related stories, topics, and articles and links. Great coverage there. He mentioned the legislature. Ardell Denwalt will be covering things here at the Capitol today from the political side of things, talking with the legislators and keeping his eye on that. Justin Wingener will be out here as well, along with our other colleagues from the Oklahoman, reporters, photographers, and videographers, covering the various angles of the Oklahoma teacher walkout. Ben, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet.
More coverage on newsok.com throughout today.